The College Football Playoff Committee is a collection of idiots, but they made the right decision here in putting Miami in the playoffs and keeping Notre Dame out. Those two teams were back to back, nose to nose, eyes to eyes, deadlocked with each other, and, staring with a staring contest, waiting for one sign of weakness and then to completely remove the other team. Well, that never really happened. Both finished 10 and 2, both had dominant wins, both were top 10 in FPI, and really I think the difference in their power ratings could be argued to be a difference in style of play. Notre Dame is more explosive. Notre Dame has more of a finesse element on both offense and defense with the turnovers and some of the explosive plays that can really seduce power ratings. Miami is a more ball control, slow tempo team that power ratings often don't like that style of play unless it's against another big opponent, and then they love it. Like see 2023 Michigan, who started off very low in FPI and through the first few weeks actually dropped outside the top 10, but then rose to 1 because their ball control style of football when they beat top opponents really impressed the metrics. FPI metrics in general are weird because they have certain constraints and aren't perfectly flexible. So there wasn't enough overwhelming evidence to say that Notre Dame is better than Miami. Therefore, head to head triumphs. If, for whatever reason, both teams were 10 and 2 with their identical power ratings and they hadn't played each other, I believe that Notre Dame would be put in due to having a bigger brand if you're cynical, but if you want to be real about it, they are power rated higher and there is something of value there. But head to head should triumph. Games, especially out of conference games and big out of conference games, need to matter. And the committee has not done a good job valuing that. If they did, you would not have the current playoff as it's constructed. You would have only the top 4 conference champions have auto bids. So no guaranteed spot for the G5, no guaranteed spot for really any conference champion. Honestly, just the highest ranked 4. So almost always that would be the SEC and the Big Ten and one of the ACC or Big 12. But because of how the ACC and Big 12 are, maybe some years the G5 gets that auto bid over them, and then it comes up to whether they're ranked enough to get an at-large seed. That would take care of what we have now, which is 2 G5 teams in, and it couldn't have been any other way because Duke with 5 losses is basically a G5 team. And instead of having both Notre Dame and Miami in, or having a BYU team in who's stronger than Tulane or James Madison, or instead of having no G5 teams in and you get Texas and Vanderbilt in, or maybe you have Texas and, say, Notre Dame in, then all of that gets cleared up. And we have a much better, more high quality, more deserving college football playoff. And everyone wins. The committee, the TV ratings, the general public, the college football fan, the analysts, as there's more fun games to talk about. Within the current constraints, this playoff bracket is honestly as good as it gets, which just shows how bad the process is. And hopefully they can make some more changes, and whether that means expanding it to 16 or whether that means excluding the G5 entirely, I think that'd be the right move. They need their own playoffs because ending the year with a blowout loss typically isn't a very good thing, honestly. They just, with rare exception, don't really have a chance. I think that outside of that, this is a pretty good bracket. Some early thoughts that I would have is that depending on how Alabama is, they looked pretty dead against Georgia. They're banged up. They look lost. It seems like they peaked in late September, October, regressed in November, and aren't as bad as they were in week 1, but show some similar concerns they had in week 1 offensively. The rushing attacks never really come together. The offensive line is overrated. Simpson is inconsistent, and the defense has improved throughout the year. The defense for Alabama, I think, is peaking, but that offense and special teams, that has issues. If they don't wake up, I like what Indiana has with their bracket. It's not going to be as tough as Oregon getting the 1 seed with Ohio State and Tennessee because A, no one this year is as good as Ohio State was last year from a power ratings angle. No one has the ceiling of that team, not even this year's Ohio State team. And also, like, this year's Indiana team, I think, is better coached than last year's Oregon team. I think they're better defensively, and that especially if you look at the history of the national champions and of teams successful in the playoff, that especially matters. And Alabama and Oklahoma are too one-dimensional offensively to probably score on Indiana's offense or defense, and Indiana's offense is multiple enough to score on both of those defenses. So I think Indiana, from a quarterfinal standpoint, maybe not the overall bracket, but a quarterfinal standpoint, won here in comparison to last year with where the 1 seed was. I think Georgia had the easiest draw of them all, getting Ole Miss without their head coach as Georgia's begun to peak as a team. And if Tulane somehow pulls off the upset, then you get, well, Tulane. And on top of all of that, you play in the Sugar Bowl, so it's going to be a de facto Georgia home game regardless. Texas Tech and Ohio State got the toughest draws from a quarterfinal standpoint. I think Ohio State got the toughest overall draw of any teams with the byes. You have to play one of Miami or A&M, and Georgia has an easier draw than you and probably is a lock to get to the semifinals. So you have to then play Georgia, and then one of Oregon, Indiana, Tech, and Alabama. Like, if Oklahoma somehow beats Alabama, they're not getting to the title game, barring a miracle. And at that point, I would eat my words. So early look here is that it's going to probably be Georgia, Ohio State representing the lower half of the bracket. I would favor the lower half of the bracket to win the national title, as I think the top 3 teams are the top 3 ranked teams by the CFP: Indiana, Ohio State, and Georgia. 2 of them are on the bottom part of the bracket. For Indiana, it's going to be hard to beat a good team twice in Ohio State. And I think that right now Georgia has the best head coach in college football, and they are the team that has the highest peak. As in, if you look at all the teams who are peaking right now, or who are playing their best ball or close to it, I think those are, like, a team that didn't make the playoffs who's doing that is Texas. In the playoffs, a team that is doing that, I believe Georgia, Indiana, I'm going to say Texas Tech after what they did against BYU yesterday was more impressive than what they did in the regular season. And I'm also going to say I think there's a possibility that Miami or Ohio State could be in that conversation, but I don't quite know. I think that Tech, Indiana, and Georgia are playing their best football or close to it. For Ohio State, I don't know. But maybe this is their best football. I'm kind of at the point where I think my opinion about Ohio State for most of the year, where they've reloaded, but they're not as good as they were last year, is coming to fruition. So that was just a long-winded way of saying I think Georgia's peaking in a way that no one else is. I think that their transformation from September to December is the most stark and has the highest rise to them. So that, combined with them getting the easiest quarterfinal draw, along with having Ohio State in their bracket, means I think that the bottom half of the bracket has better odds to win it all than the top half of the bracket, where you have Indiana, who would need to bust the BCR, but I think they can do it. I have more doubts about Texas Tech's ability to do that. For Oregon, if they are healthy and the BCR comes in play, they might have the easiest draw and the best path to ramp themselves up to win it all. So I think that from the top half of the bracket, my early read is one of Oregon or Indiana will be representing the the top half of the bracket in the title game, and one of Georgia, Ohio State will be representing the bottom half. If one team is going to bust me for either, it will be Alabama from the top half of the bracket or Texas Tech from the bottom. The only team I can really see representing that side outside of Georgia and Ohio State would be Miami. A&M, I think, is too limited, especially at the lines of scrimmage, and I think Reed is too inconsistent at QB. Beck is inconsistent at QB, but Miami's lines of scrimmage is strong. That defense is really impressive and has that ceiling to possibly be the best defense, depending on what they do in the playoffs. And Beck has also showcased a level of play to him that Reed just not has not shown yet. Plus, Miami's also on a win streak where they've had momentum, and despite playing really bad teams, they've also showcased, I think, some of their better football in the month of November than they did in October. So, out of all the teams in this bracket who I think could realistically make the title game and consequentially probably win it, you're looking at Oregon, Texas Tech, Indiana, Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, and Miami. I think those 7 teams can win it all in this bracket. And Alabama is very much a maybe, more of a maybe than Miami. Really subtract those two out, and Oregon plus the teams with a first round bye are the ones I'd be the most confident in. Miami has a lot of upside. Alabama does too, but Alabama showcased a floor in November and December that I am very uncomfortable with. That's my reaction to the college football playoff bracket, what I think about it. Make sure if you haven't already to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. I think to the best of their ability, given the constraints that they set up. So, weird way of saying the committee did an all right job. The lack of focusing on strength of schedule is terrible. It's a travesty, and they're a joke for doing that. And the fact that we have to include the G5 and the obsession with that is stupid. It's asinine. However, instead of getting a 0 out of 10 or a 1 out of 10 on the grading scale, I will give the committee anywhere from a 2 to even a gracious 4 out of 10 for how they seed this thing, for at least making the right decision about putting Miami in over Notre Dame and valuing that big time out of conference game.